Leslie Rosado was born in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, in 1986. Her parents were Jose Rosado Torres and Minerva Marte, and Leslie had three other sisters. Minerva worked as a gynecologist, while Leslie's father, Jose, was a police lieutenant colonel and a renowned engineer who owned a construction company called Armando Torres, specializing in developing smart living spaces controlled by mobile devices. After finishing school, Leslie became interested in architecture and decided to pursue a career as an architect. After studying this specialty, Leslie became part of a team of architects who designed various housing projects, which were later implemented by her father's team. In addition, the woman founded her own company that provided architectural services, and she had her own service offices called Rosado and Marte. Architecture, Design, and Construction in Santo Domingo, where her father's construction company offices were located. Friends and colleagues described Leslie as a tireless worker, always focused on her professional growth, and simply as an energetic and enterprising woman. She was a woman with a strong character, always ready for any situation, dedicated to her work and her father, for whom she became practically his right-hand person. In 2005, she married engineer Javier Martinez, and Leslie joined her husband Javier and his family at the Open Skies Ministries Church, led by Pastor Mark Yeroid, which her parents also attended. Apparently, Leslie and Javier faced a crisis in their marriage, so they decided to turn to the church to save their family. They did manage to get help, and the relationship between them was restored. In July 2021, 35-year-old Leslie turned to God again. At that time, the marriage was in full bloom, and she was pregnant with her fourth child, whom she was going to name Elias. But, unfortunately, a tragic event changed her fate forever. October 2, 2021, was Leslie's father's birthday, and it was decided to celebrate the holiday at the Marina Zarport Yacht Club in Boca Chica. Leslie was present at this family celebration and came there surrounded by her husband, their 15-year-old daughter, and 5-year-old son, while her 9-year-old daughter decided to stay at church. At about 7 p.m., Leslie left the party with her 15-year-old daughter, while her son stayed with his father. On the way to Santo Domingo, when Leslie and her daughter were driving in a white Mercedes-Benz, some unpleasant incident occurred between her and a motorcyclist. This motorcycle was driven by a 30-year-old man named Janly Disla Batista. Behind him sat his pregnant wife named Santa de Jesus Ramirez, who was in her 3rd month of pregnancy. And also with them were their children, 2-year-old Haniel and 8-month-old Janiel. Janly turned out to be a police corporal from Boca Chica who joined law enforcement on October 1, 2014, and was promoted to the rank of corporal in March 2021. According to the case file, the officer allegedly reacted offensively to the incident with Leslie, got on a motorcycle that belonged to another person, after which he chased after Leslie on it and fired several shots from a stable gun at her car. One of the bullets scratched the side of the car, and the other hit one of the rear wheels. During the chase, the officer asked for help from the soldiers of the Dominican Navy, who arrived at the scene in a special truck. At the same time, Leslie, fearing for her safety and the safety of her daughter, thought that she had become a victim of an attack, so in an attempt to escape, she decided to return to the yacht club that she had left a few minutes earlier. However, the woman did not manage to make a maneuver to turn around, and eventually Janly caught up with her on Costa Blanca Street in Boca Chica. There, the man, holding a service pistol in his hand, smashed the car window on the driver's side, after which he fired several shots. One of the bullets hit Leslie in the head and instantly took her life. Leslie's daughter screamed, shocked by this situation. She pushed her mother several times, hoping that she would react, but it was all over. Janly, in the company of another man, pulled Leslie out of the car, hoping that they would still have time to take her to the hospital. But as soon as she was on the street, it became clear that it was too late. Immediately, people who witnessed the chase flocked to the scene, and one of them called the police. The authorities, who arrived shortly, cordoned off the area and began to conduct an examination of the crime scene. Janly himself came to the police station located on Costa Blanca Street, where he worked, and was arrested there. According to the man, he began to pursue Leslie after she allegedly collided with his motorcycle and then fled the scene of the accident, leaving him and his family lying on the sidewalk. He noted that an unknown man on another motorcycle stopped and offered to help them. And it was at this moment that Janly decided to follow the woman. After that, he managed to catch up with the car and knock on the driver's window with a pistol, when suddenly a shot rang out, which accidentally took Leslie's life. The second man, from whom Janley took the motorcycle and who, in his story, decided to help him, accompanied by a lawyer, appeared at the prosecutor's office and said that he did not see any accident and that the corporal threatened him to help chase the woman. According to Leslie's daughter, it all started when someone crashed into their car from behind. At first, they didn't see anything and continued driving, but at some point they realized that they were being chased. The girl thought it was a robbery, so she told her mother to speed up and not stop. However, Leslie wanted to stop to talk to this man, which caused an argument between them. When the situation escalated and Leslie accelerated, they began to be shot at. Then the motorcyclist began to overtake them, which made the woman increase her speed. Meanwhile, the teenager tried to call Leslie at the emergency services number to report the situation they were in. But then, according to her, she just hung up as the operator began to ask strange questions. According to the girl, in the midst of the chase, her mother stopped at a red traffic light. And it was there that the corporal caught up with them. He smashed the window on the driver's side and shot her mother in the head. The girl said that Leslie turned her face and closed her eyes, and it was at that moment that she saw blood and began to touch her to see if she would react. Meanwhile, two people appeared who pulled the deceased woman out of the car. According to the girl, the one who took her mother's life swore and said that he had killed her, and the second person confirmed this and said that he had screwed up. In her testimony, the girl never indicated that the corporal was accompanied by his family, as he claimed in his testimony to the police. For her part, the corporal's wife, 38-year-old Santa, noted that she regretted the grief of the victim's relatives, but defended her partner, warning that he acted out of helplessness after seeing his family on the sidewalk. She also suggested that if Leslie had stopped after the collision and helped them then on the road, everything would have been fine. She also assured that her husband was not a bad person and noted that although she did not lose her pregnancy, she received injuries to her arms and legs. However, the medical certificates for the children, issued the day after the events by the Boca Chica Medical Center, showed that they did not receive any injuries. Leslie's death deeply shocked and stunned all the inhabitants of the Dominican Republic, as a pregnant woman was killed in front of her teenage daughter. And besides, this crime was committed by a police officer, a person who, by position, was supposed to protect people. In just a couple of days, the news of this crime spread on social networks and gained particular popularity on Twitter. Digital, print, and television media did not stand aside and also began to cover this case in detail. Such hype, as well as the lack of an official statement from the police, led to the appearance of rumors and speculation. So people, in their opinion, were divided into several camps. Some were sure that it was indeed a robbery that went wrong. Others believed that Leslie's death was a contract killing. And someone claimed that Leslie was just an accidental victim. There were also those who began to assure everyone that the corporal's family actually got into an accident and was hospitalized. But since they did not receive serious injuries, they were quickly released. Footage from surveillance cameras was published, showing several people on motorcycles chasing the car with Leslie and her daughter inside, as well as a truck, which was presumably carrying Navy soldiers who arrived at the corporal's request. Anonymous witnesses also told how it all happened. In general, their testimony confirms the story of the victim's daughter and the recordings from the surveillance cameras. They noted that the truck with the Navy soldiers drove up to the scene along with Janley, but after what happened, it disappeared from the crime scene. National Police Secretary Ana Jimenez Small called it a paused traffic accident and announced that the corporal involved in Leslie Rosado's death and the accident as a whole had been arrested. She also clarified that at the time of the incident, the corporal was not on duty and was traveling in the company of his family, and that this was not an abuse of authority, and Janley's actions were dictated by his desire. The secretary noted that they strictly monitor the actions of police officers. National Police Director Major General Edward Sanchez expressed regret over the incident and assured that the security service was cooperating with the prosecutor's office to quickly advance the investigation. The prosecutor reported that although the case was still under investigation, it was assumed that it was an intentional murder, since according to the investigations carried out up to that point, there was a chase and an attempt to harm Leslie by the officer. In fact, this version raised doubts, since at that time, not all the facts of that evening had been disclosed. However, it was absolutely clear that Leslie was the victim in this crime that took her life. In the midst of the hype surrounding this case, the relatives of the deceased held a farewell and funeral, experiencing deep grief, with tears of helplessness in their eyes and words about what a good person Leslie was. Her relatives said goodbye to her for the last time at the cemetery memorial garden in Santo Domingo. Leslie's parents looked lost and shocked, and in their speech they stated that there were no words to say goodbye to their own child. Leslie's daughter, who witnessed her death, made a touching speech, telling all the good moments associated with her mother, and also said that now without her she feels like a helpless chick without a purpose in life. The death greatly affected the high-ranking officials of the Dominican government, including the country's president. The president personally expressed his condolences to the relatives, called the crime an act of cruelty, and assured that justice would prevail. The authorities were preparing to charge Janley and his alleged accomplice with committing the crime. The hearing on the issue of choosing a preventive measure against the two accused was scheduled for Thursday, October 7, 2020. Janley's defense filed a motion for his representative to be able to personally attend the court hearing. This would allow them to better prepare for the hearing and have a better chance of success. During the trial, the prosecution brought the initial charges against Janley and Raphael in accordance with the legal qualification of intentional murder, aiding and abetting malefactors, and complicity in the commission of murder. The prosecution, as confirmation of their guilt, provided the results of tests conducted by experts on the vehicles involved in this crime. The prosecutors rejected the defendant's version that everything happened by accident. It was obvious to them that during the pursuit, the defendant intended to take Leslie's life, since he shot in her direction at least 5 times. 3 of these shots were fired during the chase and 2 at the crime scene. According to the indictment, as soon as the alleged accident occurred, the corporal fired several shots at her, which forced Leslie not to stop the car, trying to save her life and the life of her daughter. Subsequently, as has already been established, Janley got on the motorcycle of his accomplice, and together they began to chase the woman. During a rather long pursuit, Janley hit Leslie's car 3 times, in the license plate, just above and in the right rear tire. In addition, according to the preliminary investigation, 2 more shots were fired at the scene, and not 1, as previously assumed. And besides, the man tried to shoot a 3rd time, but the gun jammed. This fact was confirmed by several witnesses, which refuted Janley's version that the shot was fired by accident. The prosecutors also assessed the condition of the motorcycle of the accused, which Leslie allegedly crashed into, but they could not find any marks reflecting the fact of the accident. In addition, they managed to find records of hospital visits. The corporal's children and his wife underwent a medical examination, but no injuries were found on any of them. There were some bruises on the woman's body, but they could have been caused by something other than an accident. Weak traces of a collision were visible on both vehicles, but it remains to be determined which of the 2 caused the collision, since although there was a mark on the front of Leslie's van, this was caused by a collision with another car when, in the midst of the chase, the woman drove into the oncoming lane, trying to get to the yacht club as soon as possible. The fact of a collision with another car was proved with the help of a statement from the owner of the car that Leslie crashed into. The prosecutor pointed to the fact that Leslie's car was being chased not only by the corporal, but also by a truck with Navy soldiers, and then the presence of 3 servicemen was noticed at the scene of the incident, who were also subjected to investigation. It was also pointed out that on Janley's motorcycle, in addition to the absence of any damage, there were no license plates. This could mean that the man specifically used it to commit a crime. After the charges were brought and Janley pleaded guilty to taking Leslie's life, his lawyer pointed out that the confession was not made on the terms on which it was put forward by the prosecution. The fact is that the prosecution tried to accuse the man of premeditated murder, although the defendant himself pleaded guilty only to unintentional murder. Janley explained his act by the fact that he acted in a fit of anger after seeing his children and wife on the ground after the accident. The lawyer assured that Janley regretted what had happened and added that although he did not object to the pretrial detention requested by the prosecutor's office, he did not want this person to be sent to La Victoria prison, since he claimed that in this penal institution his life could be in danger, since he was a police officer. When it was the turn of the other defendant, Raphael, to give his testimony, he adhered to his version that he did not know the corporal and accidentally drove past this place when a collision of a motorcycle and Leslie's car occurred. Raphael said that Janley threatened him with a pistol and ordered him to chase the victim's car, so he had no choice and could not refuse. Raphael noted that Janley had a military truck with him, and he parked his motorcycle behind it, and then the man opened fire on Leslie. After hearing the arguments of the parties and analyzing the evidence presented, the court sentenced both defendants to 1 year of pretrial detention, which they will serve in the San Pedro de Macorís prison. In this regard, the defense appealed the court's decision, considering that a year of imprisonment was excessive, since, in their opinion, the evidence presented by the prosecution could be investigated within 3 months. For his part, Raphael's lawyer also appeared in the Court of Appeal, since he believed that his client had nothing to do with these events and that he simply drove the corporal to the crime scene under the threat of reprisals. Janley himself spoke in defense of Raphael, stating that he did not know who he was, and that he got off the co-defendant's motorcycle and continued on foot to the place where he committed the crime. At the exit from the court, Leslie's father commented that what happened to his daughter was done with particular cruelty, and that 2 months is quite enough for a thorough investigation so that the criminals will soon answer before the law. For its part, the Navy of the Dominican Republic published a statement assuring that the 3 military personnel who were filmed on the day the events occurred were transferred to the control of the Internal Affairs Department and the General Command, and also that they asked for a joint commission to conduct an investigation. After an intense investigation conducted by the prosecutor's office in July 2022, the Fifth Investigative Court of Santo Domingo considered that there were sufficient grounds to refer the case to court. After 3 months of trial, during which various evidence was demonstrated confirming the responsibility of the defendants, on October 31st of the same year, Janley and Raphael were found guilty of taking Leslie's life, and the judges delivered a guilty verdict. The judges indicated that at the beginning of the investigation, the prosecutor's office considered this case as an intentional murder, but in its conclusion before the court, it added an aggravating circumstance, and the judges based their decision on it. The National Police Corporal was sentenced to 20 years in prison on charges of manslaughter, and Raphael was found guilty of complicity in the crime and received a 10-year prison term. Both were placed in the San Pedro Macorís Correctional and Rehabilitation Center. Despite the fact that those guilty of Leslie's death were sentenced to long terms and will spend a lot of time in prison, the relatives of the young woman expressed disappointment with the outcome of the case. Her mother Minerva indicated that they expected Janley to receive at least the maximum sentence of 30 years, given that he could not prove that he acted unintentionally. For his part, the family's lawyer announced that she would appeal the sentence in terms of punishment. Another thing that caused outrage among many people, and which again caused a storm on social networks, was the publication of a viral video featuring Leslie's ex-husband, Javier, who appeared in the images proposing to marry another woman. The man's act caused rejection among users, since they believed that it was still too little time to start a new relationship. In August 2023, the case of Leslie Rosado resurfaced in the national media headlines after the First Chamber of the Court of Appeal upheld the guilty verdicts handed down by the Court of First Instance. The judges concluded that they did not find elements constituting the criminal type of murder that was committed, which could have led to a harsher sentence for the accused. However, in their opinion, the decision of the collegiate court did not distort the facts, and the sentence was adopted based on the principles of legality, effectiveness, and typicality. Therefore, they upheld the imposed sentences, considering that the fact of premeditation in committing the crime was not proven. After the decision was made, Leslie's family lawyer said that the court decided that since the pursuit, according to them, was committed within approximately 6 or 7 minutes, this time was not enough for Janley to react, suppress his alleged anger, and decide not to commit the crime. And therefore, the case could be considered as unintentional murder. The court's decision caused rejection from Leslie's family and the country's residents, which prompted them to take to the streets in protest. Leslie's daughter, who turned 17 at that time, posted a video on her social networks in which she asked to express protest peacefully, although she noted that the actions of the authorities were unfair. The girl expressed hope that the criminals would answer for their deeds before God, and also noted that the reason for the demonstration was not only her mother but also changes in laws, since, in her opinion, such crimes should entail more severe punishments. Leslie's father also, like his granddaughter, expressed dissatisfaction with the authorities and called on congressmen to review and update the criminal code of the Dominican Republic, demanding some changes and even adding the death penalty. Leslie's death not only left 3 children orphaned, but also raised public awareness that legislation should undergo changes so that any person, whether a civilian or an official, who commits a serious C. Leslie's death not only left 3 children orphaned, but also raised public awareness that legislation should undergo changes so that any person, whether a civilian or an official, who commits a serious crime, must be punished to the fullest extent of the law.